All right, now I want to rocket through points with Congressman Ron Paul and the time we've got left with him. The way I read the Supreme Court ruling, it's take 2 steps forward, 2 steps back. The gun grabbers are hailing it as a victory, saying, well, at least we've got a Supreme Court ruling saying we can now restrict the Second Amendment under law. And so basically, if you can jump through 100 hoops, maybe you can have access to a gun and keep it unloaded in your house. Yeah, Chicago, you can't have a total ban, but you can basically have almost a total ban. But others are hailing this as a big victory. Congressman, how do you see it?
Well, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I'm still hoping that it will be, because it's certainly perceived that way. And the people who hate guns and don't believe we should have them, they're hysterical. They're going nuts. So I'm hopeful that, yes, more people will have guns and more people will be able to defend themselves. You know, things have improved slightly in Washington. I hope they've improved, even if it's not the total package, it will improve slightly in Chicago, and then maybe it will be of great benefit to us, because what they'll probably find out is that the crime rate will go down. It has in every other city, so I haven't written it off saying that, no, this won't improve things. I think more people are going to have guns in Chicago in order to defend themselves.
Well, I agree with you to a certain extent, because I don't like having concealed carry, because that turns a right into a privilege in states where it's already legal to carry a gun holstered. But if you pass it in Texas or Florida and the crime rates drop by over 20% in both states, the same numbers in other states, even though it's a restriction to a certain extent, it illustrates that more guns means less crime, and so you win the overall intellectual war.
Yeah, that's a powerful message, and I think more and more people are coming around to that. And I think politically we generally have won this. They sort of come into some of these regulations through the back door. You know, that in the last several elections, the Democratic candidate usually doesn't go out preaching about how he's going to round up the guns and register guns. They stay away from that. They pretend that, oh, we're not going to do that, we're not going to do that. But backdoor legislation, they generally are always trying to do that.
Let's talk about the oil spill. And again, just to preface this, BP gave orders that they knew would cause a problem. It turns out 2 months before it was leaking. BP is one of the biggest contributors to Obama. They funded the carbon tax. They've got a global governance office with a vice president over it. They've always wanted to nationalize oil, so they get an inside deal. I'm very suspicious of how this has been handled. We're 70-plus days in. Obama has blocked a Taiwanese ship that can get 500,000 barrels a day scooped up. They've blocked over 30 other mega ships. Now that the hurricanes are coming in, he's saying he may look at letting them come in. Once that oil gets blown in, they're going to have a major disaster. The Washington Post is talking about forced evacuations. Obama's answer is, give me the carbon tax. Rahm Emanuel said, don't let a good crisis go to waste. I don't see this as Obama versus BP, as the media has phrased it. Really, this is Obama working with BP to try to get his carbon tax. Congressman, this is out in international water. Why don't we just have the salvagers in there to begin with? How can Obama tell people 50 miles out in the Gulf what to do?
Well, you forgot. He can write executive orders. He can write executive orders to do anything they want. So it is a real mess. You know, if a state needs some manpower, generally they don't have manpower that might be able to help out. That would be maybe their National Guard units. They're all over in Afghanistan and Iraq. I would say that, you know, if an emergency like this might be an incentive to say, hey, why don't you bring these troops home, and maybe even some different states would share some of their people to help. I mean, it's practically like an invasion the way this oil is coming in. But I think that, yes, I'm very suspicious of what BP and our government is doing and the Obama administration, and that's why I've even challenged the principle of this agreement they have to set up, you know, this fund, this $20 billion fund. Sounds like a lot of money, but it sounds like there could be a lot of mischief, too. And that was done by just executive order. The president declared, we're going to have this up. And then he came to the Congress and asked even for more authority to go any place asking questions and trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah, I saw a report that they're blocking. I'm sorry to interrupt. I saw a report in the AP yesterday. They're trying to block Republican groups from going and looking at the Gulf. I mean, Obama doesn't have that power.
Yeah, well, he might take it. He doesn't deserve that power, but sometimes they assume power that they have, but just, no, he doesn't. That's not a proper power that he has. So I'm not too pleased either, and I think, a BP corporation is in bed with government, so you have to be suspect. Just think of how much we spend protecting their oil well and their oil drilling. What do you think we're over in the Middle East for? We're not over there to spread democracy. We're over there to protect oil companies, and BP just happens to be over there as well.
Did you see the video? You probably didn't 2 weeks ago, but it was on Drudge and Infowars.com and everywhere else. Senator Kyle said he was in a closed-door meeting with Obama and said, look, tens of thousands dead, 80 miles to 100 miles, illegal aliens, they're shutting down national parks, the border's collapsing, Mexico's collapsed. And Obama said, I'm not going to fix the border till you pass amnesty. I need to use that crisis. This is a quote. And Senator Kyle said that this is basically holding us hostage in a form of terrorism. I mean, that sounds like an impeachable offense, Congressman. And to have a senator say he was in a meeting with Obama, A, what's your take on that? And B, that is a false flag to let the crime continue and not protect our border when that's in the Constitution, one of the few duties of the feds. What would you say to that?
Well, since I wasn't at that meeting and exactly what it said, I don't know, so it would have to be up to the senator to decide what to do with it. But they certainly don't act like they have an incentive to do much with the borders, and that, of course, could eventually lead to a national security problem as well.
Well, okay, Congressman Ron Paul, what about his executive order? And now they say they're going to sue Arizona. And they're saying Arizona isn't allowed to protect itself when a third of the state is now being denied to the citizens. This is confirmed. What's your view on the constitutionality of an executive order by the president to legalize the illegals?
Well, he can't do it unilaterally like that. No, Congress would have to act and take a policy on that and write the rules. Our federal government has authority over our borders. But, it should be that the private landowners should have a lot of authority, along with the states themselves with jurisdiction. And yet, instead of permitting them to exert their authority over their own land, whether it's their own private or the state, the federal government comes in and says you can't do it. So they're acting perversely to what I think the federal government ought to be doing.
Congressman, I know you're a busy man, but have you had a chance to watch Kagan and the hearings, and then expanding on that, all of her open statements about socialism being great and the government can disappear speech, going back to that, are you concerned about Kagan?
Oh, I am, but I'm sure if he put 10 new ones up in place of her, I'd be very concerned, too. I haven't watched the hearings, but I've read about her, and she certainly is not going to be a great defender of the Constitution, although she's going to make it sound like she is. So I'm not too encouraged with that appointment, for sure.
Congressman, what's your take on the Russian spy situation? It seems like they're trying to kick off a new Cold War with that, and my issue is globalization is treason. Globalization is corporations and megabanks taking over our government. And so what is the difference between Russian spies sneaking around and mega corporations coming in and openly buying off our politicians?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of hype. I think even the media, the mainstream media is sort of making fun of all this, and I think rightfully so. They just didn't look like a great threat to me. And I had somebody in for a luncheon today that was sort of knowledgeable about this, and he said that there's so much spying going on in the world. Other countries come in here, they do it routinely, and we're all over the place, all over the world, and it's almost, he described it almost like a game they play. I mean, it's really not serious intrigue, and my guess is that people like to stir things up, scare the people, and who knows, I hope it doesn't lead to another Cold War with the Russians. I don't think they're looking for trouble, and we certainly shouldn't be looking for it either.
All right, Congressman Ron Paul, we appreciate your time. In closing, and I know you'll say, well, if I was president, I would only have the powers of the president. But what would you recommend? What would you do? If Ron Paul would have been elected back in 2008, as we all wish you would have been, forecasting everything that's now happened, if you would have been elected, what would you have done with the oil spill, and what would you be doing now?
I'd probably work at getting the government out of the way. I would have done everything possible to alleviate any federal restrictions on the states or property owners. I would have accepted anybody who had an offer to come in and help. I would have worked to remove any liability limitations on BP, and I would have, of course. And by the time we had the oil spill, I would have had all the guard units back in the individual states, and they would have had the right to use their guard units as they pleased. And I would actually encourage other guard units and not pretend that the guard units belong to the president, but they belong to the states and the government. And I think they could have done a lot to alleviate some of the damage. I do not believe that there would have been any magic with any one individual who said, "Oh, I know how to cap this thing, let me do it." I actually do believe they're trying seriously to stop this. I don't think it serves anybody's benefit, but I think right now the assumption is that the government, didn't have a role to play, and what they did was actually made this worse because of the rules of pushing them out into deep sea drilling. That was part of the problem too. But I would not have closed down drilling like Obama wants to do. That's not going to help us. That just makes the unemployment problem that much worse.
Well, the Russians and the Chinese and the people in Brazil, they're not stopping drilling in the Gulf. We don't own the Gulf. He's just stopped any companies in the U.S. I mean, this is outrageous, and they're going to use it to pass cap and trade. Congressman Ron Paul, everybody's got to get behind Campaign for Liberty. They got to get behind Rand Paul. We're going to win this, and we appreciate your leadership, and we know you're there working tirelessly for us in Congress. God bless you, sir.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. There goes Congressman Ron Paul, and we are out of time. No more time for calls.